Hello! This first video covers the exact same information that I gave today during the first 10 to 20 minutes of lab section. I have made this material available mostly to make sure that people that were not able to make it to class today are still able to follow up the way that I decided to run this lab section. So for week 8, I am going to be in charge of all labs. So I'm doing Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. If you have any questions, please do feel free to send me a message. I am Adri. You can find my email somewhere on the syllabus. Today we're going to be focusing on a general practice on how to do data cleaning, data preparation, and hopefully an intro to JASP. So the main goals for today's lab section are two. So first we're going to be doing some general practice on how to do data cleaning. We are going to be using Google Sheets for that. This is mostly to ensure that you all have access to it. So Google Sheets, as you might know, it's one of the tools that are already available as part of the Drive repertoire. So this way I can ensure that we all are familiar with how to do the basic steps for our data cleaning and preparation, regardless of whatever operating system we each might use or have installed in our computers. And then we're going to move to an intro to JASP. We already mentioned this a couple times last week, but once again, couldn't hurt. JASP is a statistical software that not only is free, it's also super user-friendly, and I am really sure that you're going to be loving it by the end of this lab section. So our intro to JASP is going to be using mostly a data description type of practice. So we're going to start with baby steps, little by little. And to be a little bit more specific about what of these two goals entail, well, our data cleaning is going to be mostly focused on reproducing the general steps that you're going to have to be doing when you do your data analysis for your course research report. So some of you, especially if you decided to use the scales that we recommended that you use, so I know that the TIPI, the PSS, the Brief Inventory of Stress, and the Rosenberg contain at least one reverse-coded question. So the first thing we're going to do is make sure that we all know how to work with those reverse-coded questions. If you didn't work with the scales, please do revisit the documentation for the scale that you chose to use and make sure that it does not contain a reverse-coded question. If you do, that's okay. We're going to talk about that. Then we are going to cover the instructions, the specific instructions given to compute the scores for variable 1. So again, most of the service that we recommended that you use, most of the scales that we recommended that you use, so the TIPI, the STOMP, the Rosenberg, they have very specific instructions as to how to compute variable scores. So we're going to be covering those. Then we're going to be moving to the computation of your variable 2 scores. So again, variable 2 is the variable for which you decided or you defined your own questions, and you also defined how you were going to compute those variable scores. Most of you said that you were going to be using averages or sums. That's perfectly fine. That's what we're going to be covering for this last step. And well, finally, after we have already computed our scores for variable 1 and variable 2, we are going to be moving to JASP. We're going to be loading our data to JASP, and we're going to be doing some general data description. We are going to be obtaining some general descriptive statistics that are going to allow us to describe the general characteristics of our sample, as you might have guessed, by using the demographic information they provide. And we're also going to learn how to obtain some basic scatter plots to visualize the possible relationship between the scores that I obtain across my variable 1 and my variable 2. Now, there are a couple of things that I should note about how we're going to be running this lab section. The first one has to do with the fact that data collection is still in progress. So Dr. Kellogg has already distributed the survey links, but we are still waiting for participants to fully respond to make sure that each one of you has a sufficiently large number of participants that had responded to your surveys. So for today, we are going to use this lab section as a practice, and we are going to be working with one of the toy data sets that I have prepared in advance. So again, this is all kind of like a proxy, and then when we actually get your real data, we're going to have to do all of these steps again. Hopefully now you will know how to perform them and submit our final course research report. There are other problems associated with the topics that we need to cover. So the second one, well, it's the second one here. has to do with the fact that, as you might see, and I have indicated that with this little asterisk, not everyone will benefit from the same information. What I mean by that is that not all of you will even have to deal with reverse coded questions. And of course, the specific scale or inventory you chose for your variable 1 will dictate the type of instructions that you will need for computing the individual scores there. So not all of you require the same information. And that put me in a bit of a predicament because, well, the obvious non-solution would be to simply cover all of the materials during lab section and then just bore you extremely. None of these steps are conceptually difficult. None of these steps are particularly difficult to follow. They're just a bit tedious. And I really don't want to exhaust your memory or attention span unnecessarily. So I thought that because each one of you have like special or like have a need for a personalized lab section plan, I decided to instead provide you with this short link so that you can build your own adventure and run this lab in this way. So that's how we are solving this problem here. We are simply going to be segmenting or providing you with specific videos you can watch for each of these steps, and then you can watch them as might fit your interest better. So how we're going to be doing this build your own lab section type of adventure? Well, first of all, if you didn't attend lab section today, please do stay at the end of this video. We are going to cover together the common ground as to how to access the toy data sets that I prepare for you. So this is something that I already did on class, but we're going to be doing it again on video. That's okay. Then we're going to be talking about the fact that at 5:20, I scheduled a release of a Canvas announcement that contains all the links to all the videos that you're going to be watching to follow all these steps here listed to the left. Hopefully that is where you got the link for this current video. And at the same time, or around the same time, hopefully you should have gotten also an email that I really hope I had time to schedule with a specific list of videos that you should watch. So I am planning on going to each one of your submissions for lab 3 and 4 to make sure that I identify whether you need to deal with reverse coded questions and which variable 1 score video you would have to watch. The remaining of you, well, actually all of us, will have to be watching the videos that I made for computing the variable 2 scores and the intro to JASP. It's just a matter of the timing in which you might have a need to watch that information might change depending on your first steps. So I just didn't want to make people stay in the room, in the classroom unnecessarily, just waiting for everyone to get to the same position. And that being said, none of these videos are meant to be a substitution for lab in person. So please try to not share them with people on other lab sections. If Thursday lab section has not happened by the time that you watch this video, please do not share this with other people. I do really want people to come over because I'm going to be on the classroom answering any questions. If you're watching this video online because you couldn't attend lab section, please feel free to send me any questions you might have by email. Okay, so let's start by covering the ground rule. How are we going to access, choose, and prepare your dataset? So first of all, how are we going to access the toy datasets? So we are going to have to wait until 5:20. If 5:20 already happened, then there should already be a Canvas announcement that contains the links to download the 7 different toy datasets that I prepared for our practice. So those are listed here. Those are the names of the files that are appearing or that should appear on the Canvas announcement. Next, we have to identify which is the one that you're going to be having to use for this lab practice. So if you worked with one of the the scales of inventories that we recommend that you use for variable 1, you might have to choose one of the toy datasets that specifically contain data that mimics or that has kind of like a similar format to the kind of questions you would expect if you used one of these scales. So if you work with the TIPI, we have a specific toy dataset for that. If you work with the STOMP, we have a specific toy dataset for that. So you choose whichever of these 5 possible toy datasets fits better if you did use one of our scales or inventories as part of your variable 1. As a tool for measuring your variable 1. If you didn't use any of these 5 scales, then we have these 2 kind of like standard toy data sets. So the standard toy dataset contains no reverse-coded questions, and this other standard _with RQ, that stands for reverse-coded questions, does contain a couple of those. Those are in case that you need that extra practice. If you use one of these two files, it means that you didn't include any questions from the TP, the STOM, the Rosenberg, the PSS, or the brief inventory of stress. That's all fine. But if you do that, when we move to the step compute your variable 1 score, please make sure to revisit the documentation for the scale inventory that you did choose to use and compute your variable 1 score there. I cannot make a video for all the possible inventories or scale you used, so please read the documentation. If you have any questions, do let me know. For the remaining of this lab section, for all the videos that we're going to be seeing today, unless it's a video specifically about how to compute the variable 1 score, I'm going to be working with one of these two scales. That's just the way that I'm going to be showing you how to do this. But in your case, you should download and work with whatever of these files, or of whatever of these files, whatever of these data sets works best for you. The step number 3 has to do with how are we going to be preparing our data set. So the truth being told, again, we are not yet in a position where we can actually use the data that you actually collected through your true service. So this is all play pretend. These are all toy data sets. This is all fake data. And the truth is that depending on how you set up your Google form and how you design your survey, and this is something that we didn't really pay much attention when the TAs were describing how to do the task. I certainly didn't. You might have situations where the responses that participants give you might appear as either numeric values, so you might actually have numbers. For example, if you showed a scale that goes from 1 to 5, where 1 is strongly disagree and 5 is strongly agree, you might either have the numbers or you might have the labels that correspond to each one of those positions. So for today's practice, we're going to assume the worst case scenario. We're going to assume the latter. We're going to assume that you are registering the labels. And we're going to be doing a very quick data preparation practice in which we transform these labels back into numbers. Why do we want to do that? Well, because as you might imagine, or as you might remember, one of the main steps that we're going to be doing in our data cleaning and data preparation practice is computing the scores for variable 1 and 2. And I mean, we cannot really sum labels. We have to convert them back to numbers so that we can apply arithmetic operations to those, right? So that's what we're going to be doing. So I'm going to go to my downloads folder where I have already downloaded my standard toy dataset. So again, we're going to be working with one of these two. I'm just going to be illustrating how you do these steps. You're going to be using the one, whichever of the 7 data sets that I prepared fits better your purposes. So I'm going to be going here into my Google Drive. So I open a new Google form or Google Space. I go to Drive. I go to my UCI email address. And here, right here, I can simply take my Excel file that I downloaded to my computer, drag it here, and it should open. We can see here, upload complete. I click over here and it's going to open in a new window. So that's what I have here. Ignore that for now. In any case, what we see on screen right now, it's actually going to be very, very, very similar to the actual data set that you're going to be obtaining once we have collected the data from your service. So we are going to cover that next week when we actually have to import your actual real data. But for now, believe me that the way that our surveys are set, this is the general format that we're going to be seeing. So we're going to have a timestamp for the date and time that each participant responded to our survey. Again, this is all fake data. Don't think too much about what it says here. Then we're going to have our 5 demographic questions that we prepare for you. So we're going to have on the column name, or rather on the first row, we're going to have the column name, so containing this exact question just as participants saw them. So we have here, what is your age? If you're not 18 or older, you remember that we had that on the template. We have here the question about gender identity. We have here a question about ethnicity and so forth. We have all demographic questions here and the corresponding answers given by participants. Then I noticed here that I was a bit lazy because I didn't want to actually design the questions. But then after column F, you should have all the responses for each of your actual real survey questions. And it would be under a similar format, right? So on the first row, you should have here the actual name or the actual text that appear participants for each of the questions that you presented them with. So in this case, I would have some form of question for my variable 1. I would have here some form of question for my variable 2, and I have them sort of disorganized. The most important thing to notice for this first part of the practice is that the responses that participant gave, so the response that participants won, so in this case, the first participant who is a female, she's Latina or Hispanic, she studies psychology, she's a full-time student, and these are the responses she gave for each of the different questions included in my survey. So the first question she answered with a strongly agree, the second question she answered with a strongly disagree, and so forth. That's what we have stored here. And again, the idea here, or the reason why we are applying this survey, is that we are looking to somehow summarize or obtain a way to measure where does this participant, and actually all of them, each one of them located in a different row, where do they fall on the continuum that is represented by my variable 1 and my variable 2. How am I going to be doing that? Well, first, there's very little that I can do here because these responses are stored as labels, right? What do I mean by there's little that we can do there? So ideally, we should find a way to summarize what they replied to all questions in variable 1. So I'm going to start by signaling it. So this is a question about variable 1. This is another question about variable 1. Yet another question about variable 1. Another question about variable 1. And another one here. Excellent. So ideally, I should be able to come up with a way to summarize all the information that I have here. So in here we have that this first participant, the one that I was just describing before, the female Latina that studies psychology, and that is a full-time student, this person or this student replied strongly agree to 4 out of 5 for the questions that we prepare for variable 1. Now we need to find a way to quantify that. So most of the time what we're going to be doing is computing some form of average or sum. But again, I cannot do a sum of words. I cannot sum labels. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to transform all of these labels back into numbers. How am I going to do that? Google Sheets offers a very nice tool that I'm going to be using now. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to click here on this empty cell. This is going to mark my entire space, my entire data set. I'm going to click on your keyboard. I'm going to do Ctrl-H or go here to Edit. And here we have Find and Replace. This is going to give you the shortcut that applies to your operating system. We go there and we start by now replacing the specific labels or responses that were stored by my survey and then transforming them into something that I can use. What does that mean? So what that means is that now I'm going to look for all the instances where my cell contains a value or a label that says strongly agree. And I'm going to substitute that or replace that with a number 5. So I do this and I hit here, replace all. And now we can see that all of our strongly agrees have changed. I'm going to continue to do that. Then I'm going to move one below. The number, one number below would be somewhat agree, right? So I go somewhat agree, and that's going to be replaced by a 4. Again, I hit here, replace all. And I already have changed most of my labels here. Then I keep moving. I see that the next the next level of my scale. So 5 would be strongly agree, 4 is somewhat agree, 3 I have registered it here as neither agree nor disagree. So I'm gonna have here neither agree nor disagree. This is gonna be at 3, and I hit replace all. I'm starting to change them again. Then I do the next label on a decreasing order, so that would be somewhat disagree. That's gonna be a number 2, right? Replace all, and I'm just left with strongly disagree. This is gonna be a 1. So I do this, and now I have substituted all my labeled responses for numbers, and see that now I should be able to start coming up with ways to describe this. So again, now I have numbers that I can combine somehow. So I could, for example, take the sum here, and we could also take an average here. There are many things that we could do, but it's just much more easy to work when we have numbers. So yeah, that is our very first step. That is the very first thing that we had to cover before continue to move along. In our next video, we are going to start with our very first step on the data cleaning practice, which is how to deal with reverse coded questions.